All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Crypto 101 podcast. I'm really excited for this one, guys. It's going to be kind of all things Web3, all things infrastructure as well. We're talking to a true builder in the space. But before we introduce him, Brendan, reigning from the sunny state of Florida, how are you doing, man? Things are good in your corner of the world?
Things are good over here. It's another fantastic day in crypto, right?
Absolutely. Well, are you as excited as I am to talk with Dermot O'Riordan, who is the director of the Pocket Network Foundation? Are you as excited as I am, man? Because this is going to be sweet.
I love these conversations because we always get to learn about what is being built. What is the next fads in crypto? What are the next big topics in industries? And where's all the money getting invested in? Ooh. We get to have a short glimpse into seriously what the next verticals inside of crypto can be and everything that's happening in the background. So these are some of my favorite pods personally.
Absolutely. Well, hey, Dermot, thanks for joining us. How are you doing, my man? How are you doing, my man?
Yeah, doing great. And cheers for having me, Bryce. And Brendan too. Yeah, looking forward to this.
Well, catch us up here. Pocket Network, what is it and what's your role in it?
Yeah, sure. So I'm one of the directors on the foundation, and really our role is to be that credibly neutral, trustworthy entity, really kind of the player in the middle that's kind of helping everyone in our ecosystem work together well. And I guess big picture of what Pocket's doing, I guess Pocket, we're building this universal API to the open internet. So that's kind of a bunch of jargon there, but actually it's actually quite important. So really we're trying to make it as easy as possible for anyone to access any open data source without having to build that infrastructure themselves. And I guess a classic example is in the blockchain space, right? So if you want to interact with Blur, OpenSea, Uniswap, any protocol, even to send a crypto transaction, you need a full node for not only Ethereum, for every rollup, every blockchain, Solana that you ever interact with. So you basically have two choices. You either run that infrastructure yourself, which is a nightmare, and obviously virtually no one else does, or you get someone else to do that for you. And basically Pocket is the answer to getting someone else to do it for you, but using a crypto native ecosystem-led approach instead of a traditional company building approach.
It almost might be like the simple sort of comparison might be like you guys are kind of like the AWS or whatever, something that people don't need to spin up their own server farms in order to use and deploy applications. Kind of in the way that Pocket, you could just rely on you guys as a service provider. You don't need to worry about all the back end stuff, all the fancy pantsy stuff that all the developers worry about.
Yeah, and I guess people have definitely used
analogy.
People have definitely used AWS before. I think in some ways it's also kind of similar to like a new version or kind of a newer form of like an Uber or an Airbnb. And I guess that kind of relates to Pocket being one of the early deep in pioneers. And really it's a marketplace. So we're connecting builders or creators of these open data sources. And again, that's kind of every blockchain, every open source AI kind of foundational model with a network of people running that infrastructure for you. So kind of people with the compute to host that, serve access. And the protocol just makes that super efficient, right? So instead of actually a traditional middleman having to onboard you, talk to you, keep you sweet, you have a protocol that can actually take the payment, send that to the infrastructure providers really efficiently. And then that just kind of brings down costs, increase resilience. And of course, it's done on a fully open stack. So you can do some cool things once you're on blockchain rails in terms of, hey, actually, you're doing a lot of good, impactful work. Let's give you some governance power in our network. So I think that creates really interesting benefits once you build a network, kind of using this kind of more ecosystem approach as compared to, I guess, a traditional company building approach.
Yeah, it's the Web3 version of AWS, if you will.
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, completely.
No, super epic. But we want to backtrack here and get a little bit more acquainted with you. What side of the industry did you come in from? Were you former finance or tech or government or whatever? How'd you end up in the crypto sphere? I'm very curious. What were you doing before?
Yeah, I guess I've been a bit of a generalist. So yeah, I've been working in early tech in different forms for the last 12 plus years. So I've been in startups. I've been a lawyer in big international law firms, again, mainly advising VC firms, investing into high growth emerging technology, as well as some of those early emerging technology companies themselves, advising the founders of these businesses as they're taking on capital. I was on the board of a big global startup community. And then I guess most recently, before joining Pocket, I was as a VC. So I think there's probably been three threads that I've kind of been I guess, connected through my career over the last 10 plus years. I think first one is how best to capitalize new emerging technologies. Right, I think that's a really thorny question to do that right, to get the right people on board. Secondly, how to build sustainable governance structures around these teams, like get the right investors involved, the right contributors to the team, how to think about this. And then lastly, I think it's super important of how do we build and sustain the communities around these new technologies, to kind of bring them to life, to make them thrive. And I think if you are interested in these questions, and particularly, I guess I'm particularly interested in how do you use technology as a lever for, I guess, progress for humanity more broadly. And I think crypto is probably the most interesting place in the world to think about answering those questions. And yeah, I guess that kind of moment for me with crypto was, I followed it for years, and I had friends who've been very early in Bitcoin and early into Ethereum. But for me, the light bulb moment was with the rise of the DAO in 2016, because it's like, hey, this is kind of crazy, right? This seems hopelessly naive. These people are just throwing in hundreds of millions of dollars into this kind of native internet kind of venture capital firm. Anyone can contribute, provide ideas, support. But this is new. This is interesting. This is different. I kind of want to be part of this somehow. So that kind of got me down the rabbit hole. Getting deeper, advising, supporting, joined the space full time in 2018. And as I mentioned, I ended up joining a VC firm at the start of 2020, and that's a kind of a $30 million VC called Eden Block. And our mission there was to back the builders of what we call the new open internet. And the kind of link to where I am now was, we backed Pocket in summer 2020, and then Pocket went through a lot of its growing pains, as do a lot of crypto projects over the last few years. And after a kind of a pretty roller coaster 2022, I was asked to join Pocket on the foundation to kind of help lead the ecosystem and think about how we think about supporting our community and ecosystem and governance. And I guess the reason I really was excited to take on that opportunity was, one, if you believe that blockchains will manage and secure more and more value over time, custodying it, powering it, all these kind of great new applications, as well as the value on it, how we interact with that layer is of fundamental importance, making that as cost effective, scalable, resilient. And that's really what Pocket is solving. But actually now we're actually looking to kind of apply these same learnings to more open data sources too. And then secondly, I think Pocket is probably the most thoughtful approach to governance in the space. And I think we can really build a healthier open internet if we actually build more stakeholder governance models. And that's really us thinking about DAOs in the right way, because I think mostly we've done them in the wrong way. But Pocket has one of the most thoughtful approaches to that. So combined, I think that was for me, it was just like, this is a big opportunity, but it's exciting. And I definitely want to be part of it.
Now, before we get too deep into the weeds, I've got to ask, how did the team come up with the name Pocket? Because for the people who aren't aware, maybe they're just listening in, it's spelled P-O-K-T. So I'm curious if there is a deeper meaning behind it, or if it's an acronym. Give us the backstory here.
Yeah, it's a great question. And believe it or not, actually, Pocket was actually founded all the way back in 2017. So the original founders were actually early kind of builders and kind of tinkerers in the Ethereum space, and thinking about building kind of the first kind of crypto games. But actually, they hit scaling issues, hit RPC issues. And at the time, Infura was the only actual kind of like RPC kind of blockchain infrastructure provider. And actually, that was completely free. But they realized, hey, if this space is going to scale, we actually need a better answer to this. And actually, it likely should be on blockchain rails. Everyone should be able to participate, support it, make it more resilient. And the idea there with Pocket was everyone will have access to a global network of nodes or infrastructure in your pocket. So kind of like a silly way of thinking about it, because actually I guess a lot of thinking there with gaming will move to mobile. Everyone will have that on demand. Of course, I think we're seeing kind of blockchain powering more serious use cases, whether it's financial. Of course, gaming is coming along, and we're probably going to start to see more in mobile. But that was kind of the initial idea. And I guess kind of fast forward 7 years, it's kind of crazy how far we've come. And I guess largely that idea is still largely true, actually. But it is not quite it all just in your pocket anymore. But it's a funny backstory for sure.
I like it. I like the name. It's very descriptive, and it shows kind of where you guys believe the future is going. It was funny, kind of on a similar note, my dad had texted me the other day, and he was like, he's read something in a magazine about how if you have, $1 trillion of cash, it's 67 miles long, right? And it's just super infeasible. And I responded, well, $1 trillion worth of Bitcoin can fit in your pocket. And it reminded me I was like, oh, Pocket Network's coming up. But I didn't even think about the relation that you guys actually, are thinking about it actually, the future of finance being in your pocket and on mobile or on, individual devices. And so I'm curious, when people are thinking about building with Pocket, what are some of the advantages of building with Pocket, and as people who might share in your mindset as opposed to building with a competitor?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think it really depends on who you are and what your incentives are. I think and really, I guess the key thing about Pocket is we're really kind of creating this sharing economy around it, which is creating the incentives for all these different actors to work together. So if you're an open source developer maintainer, we actually at Pocket, we actually create a kickback or kind of revenue share for you as more demand comes for your open data source. So again, that could be any blockchain in the future. That could be any open source AI model. So the more that gets used within Pocket Network, the more kind of the infrastructure providers are helping to host and serve access to that open data source. You get a share of that. So that's a key incentive. And I think that's a great business model innovation that's good for open source. If you're an infrastructure provider, I think crazily, actually, you'd think that reading and writing access to, particularly to blockchains with the most open data sources, would be incentivized. It's largely not incentivized. So actually, we're actually providing an incentive for anyone to bring that infrastructure to Pocket. You don't need to market yourself to the end users. We'll actually have the protocol send that demand to you. So this is just additional revenue for you without actually having to do much additional work other than what you're already doing because you're running that infrastructure. And then additionally, I think a really key incentive is, I think this is a kind of a big, deep in innovation as well, is actually if you have an existing brand or network that you can tap into to sell any of the data sources that Pocket supports, you can just do that immediately. You can build a business, kind of what we call a gateway on Pocket, without having to build any of that backend infrastructure yourself. So I think that's awesome for entrepreneurship, for innovation. You can get to market more quickly, reduce your OpEx. And I think that's different to, I think most other DeepIns haven't started doing this yet. I think most people realize, yes, you probably want to have some kind of front end to abstract away the protocol, make it easy to use. But I think the real kind of crypto innovation around Deepin is actually how do we make hundreds or thousands of these businesses kind of build on these protocols? Because I think when you go back to the idea of Airbnb and Uber, I think they decentralized their supply side. And I think that was actually a major innovation that caused great kind of benefits around cost and scale. They didn't decentralize their governance, although you could argue that if they're public companies, anyone can buy their economics. But they tried to give power to their drivers and their hosts, but they weren't able to do that because of regulations at the time. And yes, we can do that with crypto, but actually, I think more interestingly, demand is the hardest thing to do in almost every kind of business. And so the idea that with Uber and Airbnb, I guess that's the same app and business trying to scale to every market in the world. And of course, they build very big businesses, but naturally they have a huge amount of competition. And actually, there's like so much waste when people have to build the same underlying infrastructure and often hilariously market to the same drivers or properties, right? Like send them loads of incentives for the same people. So we can bring that all into one big network, like what a protocol, like what we're doing at Pocket. I think it just is better for end users. So you end up having everyone sharing this kind of infrastructure layer, the protocol layer that Pocket's building. And every other DeepIn can do similar, right? And then you end up with hundreds, thousands of businesses. So I think you end up catering for many more niches, many more markets, many more ecosystems that probably wouldn't be viable to support them otherwise. So I think that's one of the cool things that we're doing at Pocket. I think we're going to start to see more in Deepin as well.
Yeah, when you're working on empowering this next generation of Web3 infrastructure, granted all from our pockets, right? What does that look like? Like, what does the next generation of Web3 infrastructure look like? What's going to change for the people out there who are going, okay, well, I'm hearing that this change is coming, but what exactly is going to change? What does that mean?
Yeah, great question. I think we're making bets, right? I think the first one is that the more open way is going to win. So I think Web3 is going to win. And I think that's exciting. That's going to unlock huge amounts of innovation. As I said, I think it's going to be great for entrepreneurs. So I think there's going to be more competition, more consumer choice. I think for end users, though, I think this is also a cool thing, is actually you're mostly going to get the benefits of more resilient, lower cost, more scalable infrastructure without actually really having to know about it. yes, if you want to go further, you can contribute, you can join these communities, you can earn, you can actually maybe buy into the kind of the economics. But the idea really is that we have these really scalable, powerful, decentralized infrastructure on the back ends. And then this is something I guess at Pocket we call the deep in mullet. So you're going to have like your kind of
The
slick,
deep in mullet,
yeah, yeah. You're going to have your like slick, fresh,
like the party in the back and the business in the front.
yeah, yeah. So you have your fresh faced kind of like user interfaces in the front, and that's going to be easy, comfortable, safe. You don't get scared away from the crypto elements. But if you want to go deeper, you want to get more technical, more degen, whatever you want, you can go contribute, go support, and you get the benefits of all this resilience in the back end. But you don't need to worry about it if you just don't care about it or have the time for it. So I think that kind of brings in a whole bunch of benefits for the next gen of, I guess, what we call, I guess, a new healthier open internet for sure.
Wow, I love it. The deep in mullet, and if you can't handle it, you don't have to worry about it because Pocket handles it for you. I love it. I mean, I think it's incredible. But let's give the listeners a little bit of context behind like what industries are going to be disrupted by this. And I think one of my favorite examples is helium, which is disintermediating in a certain capacity the wireless carriers like the Sprints and or I guess now T-Mobile and Verizon and AT&T and all that kind of stuff. They're setting up peer-to-peer sort of physical infrastructure where people could share their internet and get compensated for it. I know Brendan has a friend that's making all of his money back on his basically getting a free cell phone service from it. Like it's kind of the same amount of money that he's making from that as his cell phone service. So I'm like, wow, I mean, there's a lot of opportunity here. But that's just one example of DPIN. Are there any other of your favorite examples?
Yeah, I think it's going to really take over almost every digital service. And I think we're talking about compute in different ways. So I think Pocket as an example of specialized compute for serving data requests, but actually then again, everyone's really excited about the world of AI, but actually compute is pretty constrained right now. And maybe that will get better over time, but still it's going to be somewhat constrained. So if we can use a marketplace to onboard potentially all of the world's available compute for that particular service, you can massively reduce costs. Again, no middlemen, no bureaucracy, super efficient. So I think for training AI models, that will get cheaper. Serving inference requests, that will get cheaper. I think building different services. So yeah, the likes of, so I guess on the kind of AI compute, Jensen is one of the more interesting projects. They haven't launched yet, but they're having major breakthroughs to make computers all around the world. They can train different parts of these models. So that can really compress the costs, as well as being able to onboard data centers in every country around the world. I think we can see the storage providers are pretty interesting, like the Arweaves and Filecoins. They've built out the protocol, they've onboarded the supply side. I think the next stage for them is actually how do we really generate demand? And I think a lot of that actually is enabling these businesses to build on top and kind of abstracting away all of the kind of complexities underneath. I think what you mentioned around bandwidth and helium is super cool. There's lots of new kind of internet providers coming on board like that. I think HiveMapper, and I think there's a bunch of these kind of bandwidth mapping protocols are pretty cool. So you can have a little box in your car. There's different stuff like this. So I think we're going to see more and more of this. I think people want to get involved. So if you provide the right incentives, people will get involved. They'll provide their spare compute at home, in their offices, even at data centers, right? So I think the best way I describe DeepIn usually is actually it's community powered infrastructure. So and that community can be enterprises, can be institutions, it can be kind of retail at home. So I think having more and more participation, more and more ways to earn is only going to be good. And I think you kind of then give people more of a governance say as well. I think that's going to lead to healthier and better decisions over the kind of the performance and direction of that platform too.
Yeah, and what I want people to understand here is that all these industries, all these companies that we just mentioned, these are like 100 million, like 100 million, 100 billion dollar companies, or not billion, million.
Which one is it?
Yeah, which one is it? We have the potential to grow into this like multi-billion-dollar industry because you look at AT&T, you look at Verizon, you look at all these different cellular networks, you look at Airbnb, you look at Uber. Like if you have the ability to disrupt these industries and not only make them better, more user-friendly, potentially more profitable, people are going to be saving money. Well, that's the true power in this. And so for all the people that are wondering and listening to this saying, how big can this get? Well, just look at the industries that it's disrupting. If it's solving a $1 billion problem, well, then it's easily $1 billion industry. If we're solving $1 trillion problem, and the cool thing about this is that the sky really is the limit because there's so much physical infrastructure out there for almost every vertical, right?
Yeah.
And so, that's the cool thing is that the ceiling on something of this size really is so large because it's a global problem that can be continually built on and made better and improved over time.
Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
amen.
Just to comment on that before Dermot, you comment on that. I just looked up the market cap of Verizon, which is about $170 billion. So just to get a little bit more context around this is like $1 trillion market if you think about
Yeah.
all of the telecoms all around the world, probably even more, maybe $2 trillion. This is a really large total addressable market. And that's just the telecoms. Give us some of your thoughts on how big this industry can get.
Yeah, I think it is one of the reasons I'm so interested in it because I think the market size is so big. As you said, you have tech giants that can get disrupted by this. I think you mentioned the cloud giants earlier, the AWSs, the Microsofts, the
Yeah.
Googles. They can have some of their lunch eaten by this as well, but they can actually, I think, if this all is successful, they still have really strong brands and networks. They could tap into these deep in networks and use that to sell some of this infrastructure. So I think they also benefit. But in terms of the infrastructure and power and value that can be coordinated, I think it is in the trillions, right? I think you mentioned AT&T and Verizon. There's like Vodafone in the UK and Europe that again I think is worth 100 billion plus. There are so many of these 10 to 100 billion dollar companies around the world that are doing this kind of compute infrastructure, communications infrastructure, and Deepins just have a really neat way using kind of this marketplace model and the right incentives to really create much more sustainable and globally scalable economies actually around this. And then the neat thing is, as we kind of mentioned earlier, you still have your kind of traditional businesses on the front end, so they can still win, just that they're going to have a slightly different business model going forward, I think.
And where do you kind of see the most mistakes being made in this industry, like in DePIN, decentralized physical infrastructure? Is it tokenomics? Is it the way they're scaling? Is it something maybe as as a person who's a lawyer? Of course, nothing we say is legal advice or financial advice or anything. Is it maybe the way DAOs are being structured? Where do you see the most mistakes in this industry right now?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think to win, your product still needs to be good enough. So I think some people sometimes over egg the narrative or the promise before the product is ready. So I think you need to be really careful about that. And I think even to get to that start line, you do need to build out your protocol. You need to get your economics on point. I think that has been a hard problem over time of how do you solve the cold start problem. It's great. You can give out incentives for people to join the network, but you need to be careful for how long those incentives continue on because you need to make it sustainable. You need people paying for it as well. But if I was to pinpoint one thing, I think it's actually something that's almost more common across almost every business and startup and crypto in particular. And that's actually really the culture, because actually these are community powered networks. So how you build and maintain your culture is super important. And if you let kind of greed or entitlement or just kind of low accountability kind of culture seep in, it can really be the death knell. So yeah, keeping your culture on point, of course. Like you're in crypto, you want this to be fun, you want this to be exciting, you want to welcome in all the great new contributors, but you need to get your shit done, right? You need to be on point as well. So it's kind of playing that like nice kind of tightrope of being fun and engaging, getting the right people involved, but also making sure that you hold people accountable and they do good work ultimately.
Yeah, and you also have the strong background in DAOs, and we brought them up a little bit earlier. But I'm just curious, like, what role do you think that they're going to play here, and how can DAOs be used most effectively without catching negative attention from different regulatory bodies around the world, especially like the SEC? I mean, it seems like everywhere that they want to look these days, they're like, oh, you're going to get cited. We're going to write you up.
You're going to get cited. No, you're going to get sued.
It's not like you're getting a demerit in high school. It's like, no, they're suing you.
Yeah, completely get you. I think the cool thing is there's a really a coordination mechanism a way to make people work together better on the internet. And I think you've seen the power of many other kind of coordination technologies over the years, like even examples of, the telephone, the internet, the corporation in the first place. I think the DAO is a new evolution of that. So we can actually make kind of these new native internet organizations. And I think that can unlock huge amounts of innovation. So I think we're going to have whole new types of kind of businesses. I guess the types of the deep ins that we're talking about. That's great for creativity, great for value creation. I think the other side of it is kind of what I mentioned earlier around kind of creating this better new open internet. That's more user owned and governed. I think that's going to lead to being more sustainable, make better decisions. I think it can actually probably actually capture more value as a result, because people are less likely to challenge it if they feel they're represented. And I think on a business sense, actually, I think you can build deeper moats as a business, because actually in open source, actually it's technically anyone can copy your code, but actually if your community doesn't want to leave and the kind of the people who are already sending demand to you don't want to leave, they're less likely to go, and you're likely to kind of maintain your kind of advantage. And I guess a great way of doing that is to give people a voice, give people a say. So I think that kind of DAOs have an answer to that. I think in terms of avoiding the wrath of the SEC, I don't think there's any one thing I can say that avoids that, but I think a good starting point is actually to try and decentralize control. I think some people pretend they're decentralized to slap a token on a traditional company. And one, I don't think you're getting all the benefits that you get from decentralization of blockchains and actually the power of a community. Two, you're just a sitting duck waiting for the SEC to come after you, because it's going to be pretty obvious soon enough. I think another element is something we think a lot about at Pocket is trying to separate. I think your token should be designed to capture real value in the network, but actually one token, one vote is actually really, I guess, messy and dangerous for most governance systems. So the way we kind of design it at Pocket is governance should be earned, not bought. So anyone can buy your economics to stake, participate in your network, earn as an infrastructure provider, but to get a vote in our DAO, you need to deliver impact in some kind of way. So you need to kind of be an infrastructure provider for a certain amount of time. You're a kind of a gateway business that's sending enough demand. You're a builder or a non-technical builder, have done different things. So I think separating out these items and just being really thoughtful about your governance, I think you can actually build a really great DAO. And I guess a part of that is actually also learning from other communities out there. Is like, how do you build a real sustainable community? But yeah, we'd love to know what you guys have seen, and maybe what the bad things you guys have seen when it comes to DAOs as well, because I admit a lot of people naturally think badly about DAOs, and I think that's largely correct, but I think we can see some really cool things in the future if we do it right.
Yeah. One of the things that I saw that was done wrong, I guess I won't shout out the name, but there was one DAO that basically, sent a proposal out and saying, hey, we want to have the foundation sell some coins, and we're going to put it up to a vote, and or something like that, and the vote didn't pass, and or something like that, and the vote token. So in that instance, I was like, well, something's so wrong right there. Like something clearly didn't work. So that was one bad one. But I think I love watching different DAOs hold these community votes, and I know I think it's called snapshot.org. One great voting platform for people to go and get their voices heard on each of the different DAOs. But you need to make sure that that all this stuff is is honoring the token holder and honoring the developers, and there's aligned incentives, and we're still working on it. It seems like no, I don't know if anybody's gotten it perfect yet, but this industry is new, it's growing, and yeah, I'm just I want to make sure that we ask a very important question, kind of in closing. But what's next for Pocket Network? What should the listeners be looking out for? What are you excited about?
Yeah, thank you. I think I mentioned earlier that we're really excited by kind of innovating and proving out that deepins can scale demand, and actually we can actually have these protocols with many businesses built on top. So at Pocket, 12 months ago, we only had one of these gateways. Today we have 3 live, and soon we'll have 6 more. So yeah, 3 more kind of coming on very shortly. And then we're having a major protocol upgrade called the Shannon upgrade, after the father of information theory, Claude Shannon. That's launching in September, August, September time. So that's going to be huge, because we're going to have a much more scalable tech stack. We're going to have fully permissionless gateways. It'll be much easier to kind of scale Pocket to many more data sources as well. So I think that's really exciting. We actually also have a few teams who are experimenting using Pocket to serve LLM inference requests for open source AI. So that's cool. That's exciting.
Oh, very cool.
3 different teams working on that. I think the fact that we have so many teams experimenting on this just shows you that we have a cool builder community that can, it's not just one team, it's actually, we have lots of different teams kind of innovating in and around the ecosystem. And yeah, I guess actually connected to that, I guess the other piece is we've just opened up, like Optimism did recently, they did a retroactive kind of public goods round. We actually currently have a round going for kind of anyone who supported Pocket in any way. You can actually put your hand up, say you've delivered some impact, and actually we're redistributing some of the Optimism and Arbitrum as well as Pocket back to all these builders. And we expect many different partners from other kind of crypto ecosystems, many types of builders. And really, we hope this is a signal for anyone who is technical or non-technical or cares about Pocket's mission to kind of really start building and supporting us, because in the future, we'll be able to kind of return and reward, I guess, anyone who's delivered any kind of impact in our ecosystem. So yeah, that's kind of a cool mechanism kind of starting off soon. And yeah, we're super excited for it.
That sounds awesome. Well, you guys heard it here first. It's Pocket's an AI play as well as a DPIN play, as well as an infrastructure play. You guys are checking a lot of boxes, and we love it, and we're big fans. And we're really excited that you were able to come on and kind of give us a peek behind the curtain and let us know everything that's going on. And we're really excited for that launch, the Shannon launch upcoming in September. And maybe we'll have you back on again, and hopefully things go smoothly and you can talk about all the great new successes. But until then, Dermot, thank you so much for joining us, and stay cool, man. We'll see you soon.
Cheers. Thank you very much. Cheers, Bryce. Cheers, Brandon.